When my father died, everyone said I was lucky to inherit everything. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know that just 3 days later, my husband sat me down and said, "So, we'll give half of it to my mother, right?" I thought I misheard him. I hadn't even unpacked my grief yet, and they were already circling like vultures. That was the moment I realized. Losing my father wasn't the hardest part. The betrayal that followed was. This is not a story about money. It's about power, silence, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away from everything, without looking back. It's about love without respect, and family without boundaries. It's also a story about a letter. One I found tucked inside an old book 3 years after it was written, with a single line that changed everything. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for protecting your peace, or if you've ever stood at the edge of heartbreak and chose yourself anyway, then this story is for you. My name is Jessica Caldwell. I'm 34 years old, and up until last year I thought I had a solid life, a good marriage, a loving partner, a mother-in-law who respected her place. And above all, my father. He wasn't just my parent, he was my person. After my mother passed, it was always just the two of us. He raised me, mentored me, and built Caldwell West from the ground up into a $35 million company. He was tough, fair, and deeply kind, the kind of man who didn't just talk about legacy, he lived it. When I met Tom at a marketing conference in Chicago, I thought I had finally found someone who felt like the future. He was charming, sharp, and when he smiled, he made people feel like they were the only one in the room. I remember telling my dad about him over breakfast the following week. He gave me a look, one of those long, quiet, fatherly stares, and said, "Just remember, Jess. Some people shine under stage lights and dim in real life." I laughed. I told him not to worry. I should have listened. They say losing a parent is one of the hardest things a person can go through. And in many ways, that's true. When my father passed away, it felt like the floor beneath me disappeared. He had always been my anchor, the one constant in a world that never stopped shifting. After my mom died when I was 20, it was just the two of us. We built a rhythm: Sunday breakfasts, late-night talks, and a shared love for solving problems over coffee. He didn't just raise me, he shaped me. So yes, I expected the grief to be heavy. What I didn't expect was that it wouldn't be the hardest part. You see, grief can come in layers. Sometimes it's not the loss of someone you loved. It's the slow, painful realization of who's still standing next to you when that person is gone. I thought I'd be held by the people I called family. I thought my husband, Tom, would hold space for my sadness. But instead, what I got was coldness, calculation, and a conversation that would split my world in two. My father's death opened a door, not just to mourning but to truth. And it was behind that door that I saw everything clearly. Grief doesn't just reveal what we've lost. It reveals who we've been trusting with our heart, and whether they deserve it. And the first sign that something was deeply wrong, it came the night the inheritance papers arrived. And Tom, instead of asking how I was feeling, just looked down at the documents and said with a straight face, "So, we'll give half to my mother, right?" 8 years before my father died, I sat in the back row of a marketing conference in Chicago, scribbling notes and trying to stay awake between sessions. And then a speaker stepped on stage. A man with that kind of presence you feel before he even says a word. His name was Tom. He spoke with passion, clarity, and just the right amount of humor. The room leaned in when he did. And me. I was captivated. Not just by his words but by the way he made me feel seen, like somehow he was speaking to me, not at me. After the talk, we ran into each other by the coffee cart. He asked what I thought of his session, and I joked that his slides were great, if a little dramatic. He laughed, smiled, and just like that, something began. We exchanged numbers. By the end of the week, we'd had dinner twice. By the end of the month, we were calling each other every night. It felt effortless, magnetic, like I had finally found someone who could keep up with me without trying to outshine me. I remember telling my dad about Tom over breakfast that Sunday. He looked at me, eyes gentle but cautious, and said, Some people shine under stage lights, Jess, and dim in real life. I laughed it off at the time. I was too swept up in the way Tom made me feel. Too eager to share my life with someone who finally fit. Here's the thing though. Sometimes the people who look like the answer are just the distraction. And charm. Charm can be a mask. Lesson learned. Not everyone who walks into your life smiling has good intentions. For a while things were good. We got married 2 years later. Simple ceremony, just close friends and family. My dad walked me down the aisle teary-eyed. Tom's mother, Diane, sat in the front row in a designer dress and a frozen frown. She didn't say much, but when I overheard her whisper to Tom, "She's nice, but she doesn't really look like CEO material," I felt the first tiny crack in the picture-perfect frame. But I brushed it off because love means compromise, right? Because family takes time. Because Tom said not to worry. That's just how she is. And I believed him. I believed him. All the way up until the day my father's lawyer called. Our wedding was simple, sweet, and everything I thought I wanted. We held it in a garden just outside the city. White roses, soft music, close friends, and a father who looked at me like I was his greatest masterpiece. When my dad walked me down the aisle, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "You've always known your worth. Never let anyone make you forget it." I didn't know how much I would need those words later. Tom looked handsome, nervous but sincere. The vows felt real. For a moment everything was good. And then there was Diane. Tom's mother sat in the front row. Her expression unreadable behind designer sunglasses and a $1,000 dress. She clapped politely during the ceremony, smiled tight-lipped during photos, and disappeared before the cake was even cut. I thought maybe it was nerves. Or maybe weddings just weren't her thing. But then came the whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. At the rehearsal dinner, I passed by their table just in time to catch her say, "She's nice, but she doesn't really look like CEO material." It was like cold water down my spine. I hadn't even married into the family yet, and I already knew where I stood, with one foot politely outside the circle. Still I tried. I sent flowers on Mother's Day. Invited her over for dinner. Gave her space when she needed it and conversation when she didn't. And Tom, he always said the same thing. "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally." But here's the truth. When someone hurts you repeatedly and you're told to ignore it, you don't just start questioning them, you start questioning yourself. When someone makes you feel like an outsider in your own story, don't shrink to fit their version. Respect is not optional. And family is not just blood. It's behavior. Over time, I started noticing the small things. Diane's silences, her backhanded compliments, the way she'd refer to Tom's future like I wasn't part of it. But I kept showing up. Kept trying. Because that's what love does, right? Until it can't anymore. And that moment came the day after my father's funeral, when a lawyer called and invited me to his office. At the time, I thought it was just paperwork. I had no idea what was waiting behind that door. The day after my father's funeral, I got a call from his lawyer. He asked me to come in, said there were some final documents to review regarding the estate. I didn't think much of it. My dad had always been generous, but quiet about money. I figured there might be a property or two, maybe some savings, a retirement account. Enough for a safety net, maybe even an early retirement someday. What I wasn't expecting was everything. The company, the homes, the investments. After taxes, fees, and debts, it totaled just over $35 million. And every penny was left to me. I sat there in the lawyer's office, staring at the papers, my hands trembling, the world suddenly still and deafening all at once. I wasn't excited. I wasn't even relieved. Felt empty. Because all that money, it didn't feel like a gift. Felt like a gravestone carved in numbers. That night, I spread the documents across the coffee table. I didn't touch a single glass of champagne. I didn't post a single celebratory photo. I just sat there, surrounded by silence and loss, with my dad's signature on a page that screamed, "I'm gone." And then Tom came home. He walked in, glanced at the paperwork, and gave a low whistle. "So it's true," he said, sitting beside me. "It's really all yours." I nodded slowly, still numb. He grinned, but it wasn't the warm kind. It was calculating. "Well, we should probably talk about what to do with it," he said. "Maybe invest some, look at buying that place in Aspen you liked. And of course." He paused, as if delivering a line he'd rehearsed. "We'll have to figure out how much to give my mom." Blink. He looked at me, completely serious, and said again, "Half. We give her half, right?" For a second I thought he was joking. But his face didn't move. No smirk, no sarcasm, just pure, entitled certainty. And something in me snapped. I laughed. Not the sweet kind. Not the relieved kind. But the kind of laugh that only comes when reality is so absurd, your body can't figure out what else to do. Here's what I learned in that moment. Money doesn't change people. Just hands them a microphone. And Tom. He used that microphone to tell me exactly who he was. The grief I thought I was carrying for my father was now being swallowed by something darker. Not just loss but betrayal. And I hadn't even gotten to Diane's reaction yet. You know those moments when time doesn't just slow down, it pauses? That was me. Sitting there, watching my husband calmly suggest we hand over half of my father's legacy to his mother, like we were splitting a dinner bill. I looked at Tom, heart pounding, trying to read his expression. But there was nothing to read. He was serious. He wasn't asking. He was expecting. "Tom," I said quietly, "this is my inheritance. From my father. Why would we give half of it to your mother?" He smiled, not kindly but condescendingly. "Because she's family, Jess. She sacrificed for me. Raised me alone. It's only right. Only right." I wanted to scream. Diane hadn't lifted a finger to support my dad. She barely said hello at our wedding. She left his funeral early. And now, she wanted millions. I reminded Tom gently at first that my dad left this money to me, not us. That it wasn't a lottery win. It was the sum of his life's work. That I was still grieving. He leaned back and scoffed. "Don't be selfish," he said. "She's my family. What's yours is mine." That word selfish hit like a slap. And that's when the realization settled in. Tom wasn't just suggesting something outrageous. He believed it. Deep down, he truly thought that my pain, my loss, my father, were all just stepping stones toward his and Diane's better lifestyle. When someone calls you selfish for protecting what's sacred to you, what they're really saying is, "I don't respect your boundaries." I stood up. "I need some air." As I walked out, I heard him mutter under his breath, "Unbelievable." It was unbelievable. Because this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about how quickly the man I loved turned my father's death into an opportunity. How fast we became me. And me became a threat to what he thought he was owed. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, hearing his tone, watching his face. And then, as if the universe wanted to confirm everything, I got a phone call the next day. It was Diane. Have you ever been in a moment like this? When someone you trusted revealed a side of themselves you never expected? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me. What would you have done if you were in Jessica's shoes? Sometimes just sharing your story is a kind of healing. And who knows? Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. The next morning my phone rang. "Jessica, sweetheart," Diane crooned through the receiver, her voice coated in sugar. "Tom told me the wonderful news. Your father was such a smart man. I'm so proud of you." I said nothing. And then came the part she really called for. "I know this might be a little awkward," she continued. "But since you're coming into all that money, I thought maybe we could sit down and talk numbers. Investments, real estate. Maybe something small and tasteful for myself." It was like being punched while still healing from the last blow. "Diane," I said as calmly as I could, "I lost my father less than a week ago." She clicked her tongue. "And he would want you to take care of family. That's what good daughters and good wives do." Something inside me cracked. Diane, with all due respect, you are not my family. And you are not entitled to a cent of this money. The fact that you're even bringing it up right now says a lot about who you really are. Her voice dropped cold. You always thought you were too good for us. Let's see how long you last when you're all alone, sweetheart. She hung up. I just stood there, phone still in my hand, my whole body shaking. Not from fear. From clarity. That day everything changed. I realized this wasn't grief anymore. This was greed. And the people closest to me weren't mourning with me. They were circling me, waiting to feed. I began locking the office in our home where I kept the legal documents. I changed every password. I moved part of the inheritance into a separate account. And then I scheduled a second meeting with my lawyer. This time alone. I'm not sure yet, I told him. But I need to know what my rights are. He looked at me for a long moment, then said something that chilled me. You're not the first to come in here after an inheritance, he said. But most people don't come with security cameras. Cameras? Yes. He leaned forward. Install them now. Especially if you live with someone who thinks they deserve half of everything. So I did. 2 days later, I caught Diane rifling through my desk drawers. When I confronted her, she didn't even flinch. Oh, Jess, she said casually, like she'd just been reaching for a pen. Tom said you keep notepads in here. Her hand was resting just inches from the locked drawer, the one that held the inheritance documents. I stood there, heart pounding but face steady. If you need something, I said, ask. She gave a tight smile. Of course, dear. Later I checked the camera footage. Clear as day. Diane, flipping through folders, checking envelopes, scanning labels. She wasn't curious. She was hunting. Trust isn't broken all at once. It's eroded, moment by moment, excuse by excuse, lie by lie. And the people who gaslight you the most are often the ones who fear your clarity the most. That night I confronted Tom. I told him what I saw. His response. She's just curious. People get curious. You're being paranoid. And that's when I knew. I wasn't living with a partner anymore. I was living with people who wanted access. Not connection. Control, not closeness. And that's when I stopped grieving and started planning. I thought I had seen the worst of Diane. I was wrong. It was a Thursday morning. I had just gotten out of the shower when I walked into my kitchen and froze. There she was, sitting at my kitchen table. Barefoot, in a silk robe slightly open, drinking from my favorite mug like she owned the place. She hadn't knocked. She hadn't called. She had used the emergency key, the one Tom claimed he gave to the dog walker. Good morning, she said sweetly, as if this was some casual coffee date between friends. We need to talk. I didn't sit down. I didn't even blink. She went on, voice soft but heavy with implication. I just want to make sure you're not doing anything impulsive, she said. You've been under a lot of stress. I'd hate for you to make a financial mistake just because you're grieving. Financial mistake. That's what she called my father's legacy. That's what she called my grief. I took a slow breath and replied. You mean a mistake like not handing over millions of dollars to a woman who hasn't worked in over a decade and calls me greedy behind my back? Her eyes narrowed. Careful, Jessica, she said. It's not wise to make enemies in your own home. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice calm. This house isn't yours. And neither is the money. Now get out before I call the police. There was a long pause. She stood slowly, glaring. You think you're so smart. But women like you crack sooner or later. I held her gaze without flinching. Not today. She stormed out. I locked the door behind her. And then I called my lawyer. It's time, I said. I want to move forward. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is protect your peace in your own space. And when people stop knocking and start barging in, that's not love. That's invasion. That was the moment I knew there was no going back. Not with Diane. Not with Tom. Not with any version of the life I had once tried so hard to protect. And so, I began preparing for the conversation that would change everything. But this time it would happen on my terms. Neutral ground. Public place. No more surprises. When I called Tom and asked to meet for coffee, I kept my voice steady. Just want to talk, I said. Somewhere quiet. Neutral. He agreed, probably thinking I was ready to reconcile. Maybe even apologize. I let him think whatever he needed to. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early to a small cafe near the courthouse. I sat at a corner table, back to the wall, full view of the door. In my bag, an envelope of divorce papers, a flash drive containing video footage, audio recordings, screenshots, every piece of evidence, and a heart that, for the first time in weeks, felt steady. Tom walked in 5 minutes late, wearing his most casual smile. "Hey, Jess," he said, sliding into the seat across from me like nothing had happened. "What's this about?" I didn't waste time. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and slid it across the table. He glanced down. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said. "This is me saying I'm done." He gave a cold little laugh. "You're serious? Over money?" "No," I said calmly. "Over betrayal. Over you and your mother treating my father's death like a golden ticket." His smile disappeared. "I supported you, Jessica. For years. I stood by you. And now that you're rich, you're just going to throw me away." I looked him dead in the eye. "You threw yourself away the moment you decided your mother deserved more than your wife." His voice dropped. "Whoa, angry. You think you can walk away with everything? We're married. That money is half mine. That's the law." I reached back into my bag, pulled out the flash drive, and placed it gently on the table. "Actually, it's not." His brows drew together. "My lawyer confirmed it. The inheritance is separate property. My father left it directly to me. You have no claim to it. Not a cent." He went pale. "You're bluffing." "Then take me to court," I said. "But just know this drive contains every conversation, every threat, every manipulation, including your mother snooping through my office." He stared at it like it was poison. "When you're prepared, you don't need to raise your voice. You just need to lay down your truth." I leaned in slightly. "I'm offering a fair settlement. You take what we built together, nothing more. Or you can fight me and leave with even less." He didn't say a word. Just reached out, took the envelope, and left without looking back. That night I changed all the locks. I had a cease and desist letter delivered to Diane's door. And I blocked them both. On every device, every channel, every possible way back in. Because this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of freedom. And of course, they weren't going to let go that easily. In the days that followed, my house felt quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels lonely, but the kind that feels earned. No more heavy footsteps. No more perfume lingering from someone I never invited. No more pretending. Just silence. Just peace. But peace, I learned, is rarely left alone for long. 3 days after Tom walked out of that cafe with the divorce papers in hand, my lawyer called. Tom had filed a response, demanding spousal support. His claim that I had built considerable wealth during the marriage, and that his emotional support entitled him to a share. My hands went cold. This was the same man who'd barely held my hand at my father's funeral. The same man who said I was being greedy for protecting what my father left me. Pathetic didn't even begin to describe it. But I didn't panic. I had prepared for this. My legal team responded with everything. The footage of Diane rifling through my office. Screenshots of Tom trying to hack my laptop. Audio of him calling me a hoarder. And journaled records of every conversation since the inheritance had been revealed. The judge reviewed the evidence and rejected Tom's claim in full. No spousal support. No access to the inheritance. And the court formally acknowledged the behavior as manipulative and predatory. Meanwhile, Diane tried to sue me for emotional distress. It was thrown out before it even reached the hearing. Entitlement is a house built on sand. And when you take away the illusion of control, some people collapse under the weight of their own fantasy. Word got around. Tom had moved back in with Diane. He had quit his job just days after my father's death, assuming, I suppose, that he'd be living off my inheritance. No, he had no job, no car, because it was registered under my father's company and repossessed. No house, and no plan. Diane had defaulted on another credit card and was now renting a basement apartment on the edge of town. Their so-called dynasty was gone, because it was never real to begin with. And me, I wasn't rebuilding from scratch. I was rebuilding from truth. The next step wasn't about revenge. It was about something better. It's been 7 months since the divorce was finalized. 7 months since I walked out of that courthouse with a signed decree in one hand, and something deeper in the other, peace. I sold the house. Not out of spite, not even necessity. I just didn't want to carry ghosts anymore. Every room echoed with things that weren't mine. Diane's voice, Tom's silence, doors that closed a little too loudly. Instead, I moved into the downtown apartment my dad gave me years ago. I had never touched it, never needed it, but now it felt like a gift waiting to be claimed. I renovated it with light and softness. Windows open to morning sun, warm colors, gentle corners. And on my first night there, I lit a candle, sat by the window, and just breathed. No noise, no manipulation, no pretending, just me. That's when I found it. Tucked inside an old book on his shelf was a letter. My father's handwriting, dated 3 years before his death. Jessica, if you're reading this, it means I'm not around anymore. I want you to remember something important. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. Don't ever feel guilty for having what others feel entitled to. Share when it's love. Protect when it's pressure. And if someone ever makes you choose between peace and pleasing them, choose peace every time. I sat with that letter for a long time. And I cried, not out of grief but out of relief. Because even in his absence, he gave me exactly what I needed. Compass. Reminder. That I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't wrong for choosing myself. Power isn't loud. It's not screaming. It's not slamming doors. It's not fighting for people to understand. Power is walking away without needing to be seen. Power is peace. And that is the greatest revenge I ever took. I didn't just survive my marriage. I outgrew it. Thank you so much for listening to Jessica's journey. If there's one truth this story reminds us of, it's this. Peace is not something we find, it's something we protect. Choosing yourself, setting boundaries, walking away from what no longer respects you, these are not acts of selfishness. They're acts of courage. Now I'd love to hear from you. What part of Jessica's story resonated most with you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who couldn't see your worth? Leave a comment below. Your voice matters, and someone out there might need to hear it today. And if this story moved you even just a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that speak to the soul. Until next time, stay strong, stay soft, and never forget. Choosing peace is always a powerful decision.